There is a moment in every man's life when he realizes a painful truth. The harder he chases approval, the further it moves away. Most men spend years believing that attraction is earned through effort alone. They think if they text more, care more, explain more, and sacrifice more, they will eventually be chosen. But reality rarely rewards desperation. People value what appears valuable, and value is never created by begging. The man who constantly seeks validation unknowingly places himself beneath the very people he hopes will admire him. Every unnecessary explanation, every attempt to prove his worth, every act performed solely for acceptance sends a silent message: I need you to choose me. The world responds accordingly. Power begins the moment that message disappears. The strongest men are not driven by the fear of rejection. They are driven by purpose. Their attention is focused on building, creating, growing, and becoming. They do not wake up wondering who likes them. They wake up wondering how far they can push themselves. This mindset changes everything. When a man becomes obsessed with his mission, he stops monitoring every text message. He stops analyzing every interaction. He stops treating other people's opinions as a report card on his value. His center of gravity moves inward, and that is where true confidence is born. Confidence is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It does not enter a room demanding attention. Real confidence is quiet. It is the calm certainty of a man who knows exactly who he is, even when nobody is applauding. Most people mistake confidence for arrogance because they cannot tell the difference between self-belief and self-promotion. Arrogance seeks witnesses. Confidence does not. A confident man doesn't need to dominate every conversation. He doesn't need to prove he is smarter, stronger, richer, or more important. His identity is not fragile, and because it is not fragile, it cannot be easily manipulated. This is where many people lose their power. The moment someone discovers what you desperately need, they gain influence over you. If you desperately need attention, attention controls you. If you desperately need approval, approval controls you. If you desperately need affection, affection controls you. Your freedom begins where your desperation ends. That does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending not to care. It means caring without becoming dependent. The man who cannot be controlled is not emotionless. He simply refuses to place his happiness in someone else's hands. He enjoys connection. He appreciates loyalty. He values love. But he never treats them as oxygen, because the moment another person becomes your oxygen, you begin negotiating against yourself. You tolerate disrespect. You ignore red flags. You abandon your standards. You become willing to lose yourself just to avoid losing them. And that is never strength. Strength is maintaining your identity, even when attachment tempts you to abandon it. Think about the most respected individuals you have ever met. They were probably not the loudest. They were probably not the most aggressive, but they possessed something undeniable: presence. Their words carried weight because they spoke with intention. Their actions carried influence because they acted with conviction. They did not rush. They did not force. They did not chase. They understood that true authority comes from self-mastery. The modern world constantly encourages impulsive behavior, instant reactions, instant gratification, instant emotional outbursts, but the man who masters himself operates differently. When others react, he observes. When others panic, he thinks. When others seek attention, he seeks understanding. This creates a kind of psychological strength that cannot be purchased and cannot be faked. Because self-control is visible, people can feel it. They can sense when a person is acting from discipline rather than emotion. And discipline is attractive in every area of life. It attracts respect. It attracts opportunities. It attracts trust. Most importantly, it attracts peace. The truth is simple. The person who controls his emotions controls his decisions. The person who controls his decisions controls his future. And the person who controls his future no longer lives at the mercy of circumstances. He becomes the author of his own story. That is the first transformation, the death of neediness, the birth of self-respect. And once that process begins, everything changes. Once a man stops chasing validation, a strange thing happens. He begins to see the world differently. The noise that once consumed his attention starts to fade. The opinions that once controlled his decisions lose their power. The constant need to impress others slowly disappears. For the first time, he begins to understand the difference between attention and respect. Many people spend their lives pursuing attention. They want to be noticed. They want to be admired. They want to be talked about. But attention is temporary. Respect is enduring. Attention can be gained in a moment. Respect is earned over time. A person may capture a room with charisma, but only character can keep that room listening once the excitement fades. This is why presence is so powerful. Presence is not something you wear. It is not a technique. It is not a performance. Presence is what happens when a man becomes fully comfortable with himself. He no longer feels the need to fill every silence. He no longer rushes to defend every criticism. He no longer feels compelled to explain every decision. He understands that not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every challenge requires a response. Not every battle deserves his energy. This realization separates the mature man from the immature one. Immature people are constantly reacting. They react to comments. They react to opinions. They react to emotions. Their lives become a series of responses to external events. But the man with presence chooses his responses carefully. He understands that energy is a resource, and resources should be invested wisely. The strongest tree in the forest does not waste its strength competing with every gust of wind. It stands. It bends when necessary. It remains rooted. And because it remains rooted, it survives storms that destroy weaker trees. Human beings are not much different. Life will test everyone. There will be rejection. There will be disappointment. There will be betrayal. There will be moments when things do not go according to plan. The question is never whether challenges will arrive. The question is whether those challenges will control you. Most people spend their lives being pulled in different directions by circumstances. A compliment makes them feel powerful. An insult makes them feel worthless. Success inflates them. Failure destroys them. Their emotional state becomes dependent upon events they cannot fully control. This creates instability, and instability creates weakness. The man who cannot be controlled develops a different approach. He learns to remain steady regardless of external conditions. When success arrives, he stays humble. When failure arrives, he stays focused. When praise comes, he appreciates it without becoming addicted to it. When criticism comes, he examines it without becoming wounded by it. His identity remains stable. This stability creates confidence that others can feel. Why? Because certainty is rare. Most people are uncertain about who they are. They change their personalities depending on who is watching. They alter their values depending on what is popular. They abandon principles when pressure appears. As a result, they become difficult to trust. A person who constantly changes can never become a reliable foundation. But the man who stands firmly in his values becomes different. People know what he represents. People know where he stands. People know what he will tolerate and what he will not. This consistency creates respect, and respect creates influence. Influence is often misunderstood. Many believe influence comes from force. They believe power means controlling others. In reality, the most powerful people rarely need to control anyone. Their influence comes from the example they set. They inspire rather than demand. They lead rather than push. They create standards that others naturally choose to follow. This kind of influence cannot be manufactured. It must be earned. And it begins with personal discipline. Discipline is the bridge between potential and reality. Every man has goals. Every man has dreams. Every man imagines a better version of himself. But imagination alone changes nothing. Transformation requires action. It requires consistency. It requires the ability to do what is necessary, even when motivation disappears. This is where most people fail. They rely on emotion. They act only when they feel inspired. But emotions are temporary. They rise, they fall. They change from day to day. Discipline remains. The disciplined man works when he feels motivated. He also works when he does not. He keeps his word when it is easy. He keeps his word when it is difficult. He does not make decisions based on temporary feelings. He makes decisions based on permanent values. Over time, this creates something extraordinary. Trust in oneself. Nothing is more powerful than self-trust. When a man knows that he will follow through on his commitments, he develops a level of confidence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. He trusts his ability to adapt. He trusts his ability to recover. He trusts his ability to endure. And because he trusts himself, he becomes less dependent on reassurance from others. This independence is magnetic, not because it creates mystery, not because it creates distance, but because it demonstrates strength. Real strength is not domination. Real strength is self-command. It is the ability to remain calm under pressure. It is the ability to maintain principles when compromise would be easier. It is the ability to keep moving forward when excuses would be more comfortable. The world notices this. People may not always admit it, but they recognize it. They recognize the person who refuses to quit. They recognize the person who remains composed during chaos. They recognize the person whose confidence comes from substance rather than performance. That person becomes memorable, not because he demands attention, but because his presence speaks before his words ever do. And when a man reaches that point, he discovers something remarkable. The need to control others disappears, because he has finally learned to control himself. And self-mastery is the foundation upon which every lasting form of power is built. There comes a point in every man's journey when he faces the ultimate question: who is really in control? Not of his career, not of his relationships, not of his reputation, but of himself. Because a man can build wealth and still be a slave to fear. He can earn status and still be controlled by insecurity. He can command attention and still be desperate for approval. The greatest victory is not over other people, it is over the weaknesses that live within. Most men spend years fighting battles in the outside world while losing the war inside their own minds. They conquer challenges, but cannot conquer doubt. They achieve success, but cannot achieve peace. They gain influence, but remain prisoners of anxiety. True power begins when a man stops measuring himself against others and starts measuring himself against his own potential. That is the moment everything changes. He no longer competes for validation. He competes with the person he was yesterday. Every day becomes an opportunity for growth. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every obstacle becomes training. He understands that life is not happening to him. Life is shaping him, and the stronger his mindset becomes, the less authority circumstances have over his emotions. This is the secret that many never discover. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to remain true to yourself regardless of what happens around you. The world will always be unpredictable. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Opportunities will come and go. Nothing external is guaranteed, but your character can be. Your discipline can be, your standards can be, and those are the things that matter most. A man who relies on circumstances for confidence will lose confidence whenever circumstances change. A man who builds confidence through character carries it everywhere he goes. That confidence becomes his foundation. It follows him into every room, every conversation, every challenge, every opportunity, because it is no longer dependent on outcomes. It is dependent on identity. The strongest men understand something that weaker men often overlook. You do not become powerful by controlling every situation. You become powerful by remaining composed in situations you cannot control. That is the difference. Anyone can appear strong when life is easy. Anyone can appear confident when everything is going according to plan. But pressure reveals the truth. Pressure exposes character. Pressure uncovers weaknesses. Pressure removes the mask. And when pressure arrives, the man who has built himself from the inside out remains standing. Not because he is fearless, but because he has learned how to move forward despite fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of it. Every meaningful achievement requires courage, the courage to risk failure, the courage to face rejection, the courage to walk alone when necessary, the courage to stay loyal to your principles when others abandon theirs. This is what separates leaders from followers. Leaders do not wait for certainty, they create it through action. They do not wait for confidence to arrive, they build confidence through repeated acts of discipline. They understand that greatness is not a gift, it is a habit of showing up, a habit of improving, a habit of refusing to surrender. Day after day, year after year, while others search for shortcuts, they embrace the process. While others seek comfort, they pursue growth. While others make excuses, they make progress. And eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. But even then, the truly powerful man remains humble. Because he understands that arrogance is weakness disguised as strength. Arrogance requires constant defense. True confidence requires none. A mountain does not need to convince anyone of its height. The ocean does not need permission to be vast. The sun does not ask for recognition before it rises. Likewise, the man who has mastered himself no longer seeks constant acknowledgement. He knows his value, he knows his mission, he knows his direction, and that certainty creates peace. A peace that cannot be purchased, a peace that cannot be granted by another person, a peace that comes only from living in alignment with your values. This is the final transformation. No longer chasing, no longer proving, no longer performing, simply becoming stronger, becoming wiser, becoming more disciplined, becoming more resilient. The world may continue to change around him. People may come and go, success may rise and fall, but he remains grounded, steady, focused, unshaken, because he has discovered the truth that escapes so many. The most powerful man in the room is not the loudest, not the richest, not the most admired. It is the man who owns himself completely, the man whose emotions serve his purpose, the man whose discipline outlasts his motivation, the man whose character remains intact under pressure, the man who can stand alone without feeling lonely, the man who can walk away without bitterness, the man who can succeed without arrogance and fail without surrender. That man cannot be controlled because he has already conquered the only kingdom that truly matters, the kingdom within. And when a man rules that kingdom, he no longer needs to chase power. Power follows him, not because he demands it, not because he forces it, but because self-mastery is the highest form of strength. And strength rooted in character never fades. It becomes a legacy, a standard, a way of life. So build yourself, strengthen your mind, sharpen your discipline, protect your standards, honor your word, master your emotions. And remember this, the moment you stop seeking permission to become who you were meant to be, you become dangerous to every limitation that once held you back. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to your fears, dangerous to your excuses, dangerous to the version of yourself that settled for less. That is where transformation begins. That is where freedom lives. That is where the man who cannot be controlled is born. And once he is born, there is no going back.